All right, so we are recording. Hello and welcome to the weekly Sig Docs meeting. This is the Sig Docs channel. If you were expecting kubeadmin maintenance or core API, sorry, wrong meeting. I'm happy to provide you to the link to the community calendar with all the goings on in Kubernetes. But this is Sig Docs, so welcome. Before we get rolling, are there any more items for discussion on the agenda? I know we had one last minute addition. I just want to give the chance for others to add anything to the discussion before we get rolling. Hearing nothing, let's proceed to new attendees. I don't see anybody new, but if you would like to be new, or if you are new, or if you feel new, this is a great time to introduce yourself. All right, no new attendees today. So let's go to the agenda. First up, we have an item for a 1.9 release shadow. So if you are interested in shadowing a Kubernetes release in order to be a release meister later for future releases, I can't remember. I need to confirm whether Steve Perry has actually self-selected in for 1.10. But if you, the release process is really interesting, and if you'd like to shadow a release and see how it's done, and if you are interested in being part of the release cycle for Kubernetes, we need a shadow for the 1.9 release, and that you would basically not have to really do anything other than observe and take notes and see how it's done. And it's a chance to do a dry run in advance of actually taking on the responsibility. So if you're interested in being a shadow, or if you're just really curious about how it all happens, drop me a note. Is there anybody who's just interested right off the top of your head? Brad, Abigail, excellent. I would be happy to add you both as shadows. Let me make a note about that. Okay. Abigail McCarthy. Excellent. All right, moving on to recent updates. We have two. Let's see. Oh, I see your note, Jessica. Okay, well, I will note you down and put a note here that you will follow up. Okay, so moving on to recent updates. We've got two sort of notable updates to bring to light. One is Andrew Chen and Jessica Yao have added a glossary of standardized terms to the Kubernetes reference, and it is awesome. We saw the demo, and it looks as good in practice as it did in the demo, and it's just freaking amazing. So that is a wonderful accomplishment. I am just realizing that I'm going to add an agenda item to talk about doc sprints at KubeCon. Jared is not here in the meeting today, but he worked on a blurb. Well, okay, we'll get to that in a moment, sorry. So the glossary, the addition of the standard glossary. Awesome dose likes. Another update is in the Chinese translation process, Andrew has done more work to add collaborators for the Chinese translation teams into the Kates org, and has also done some of the groundwork of emptying out an existing repo and preparing it to host Chinese translation material. So TLDR, the translation is going apace. It's coming along nicely. Right, that's it for recent updates, unless anybody else has done something awesome or wants to raise up something awesome that is happening. Okay. So let's talk about doc sprints at KubeCon for a moment. Jared has proposed a couple of topics lightly for a doc sprint at KubeCon in Austin in December. And one of those is adding terms to the glossary. That might make, it's a very nicely bounded in scope. project for a doc sprint. So let me see if I can find the other projects that Jared has proposed for doc sprints are improving user journeys, adding to the glossary, and improving, giving better documentation for the release note process. So that's still very much an open field, though. So if you have ideas for what we can do at doc sprint, this would be a great time to add them, great time to bring them to light, because we've got to start narrowing down that window soon and start choosing what we're actually going to do and start preparing for it. So if you have a project that you'd like to consider for the doc sprints at KubeCon, we're definitely open. Anybody have any ideas? That's okay. Think about it. And if ideas come to mind, if you're like, oh yeah, we could, if we just got like a whole bunch of people working on this and banging it out, we can make this really good. Drop us a note or drop a note in the Sig Docs channel. Okay.
I had just one thing, Zach.
Yeah.
A while back, I think it was Andrew was working on a contributor's guide, and I know I'd done a blog article about how to use tools to help contribute. Could that become part of a sprint, or is that like a totally different work item kind of thing?
Well, so I think, if I'm remembering correctly, I think Andrew's project was the user journeys.
Okay.
And that would be if you have something in particular that like a particular path along a user journey or a particular focus area inside of that, that would be a great thing to consider. So if I don't know if you want to like open an issue for it or just like write a paragraph about it.
Okay, let me noodle on it and see what I can come up with.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
And probably yeah, I'm trying to think about the best way to communicate that information. I think, yeah, you can open an issue, either drop a line or open an issue. Either of those are valid ways to go.
Okay.
Okay. Thank you. Let's see. See a note from Jennifer. We should probably figure out a way to document who's already working on currently defined user journeys. That would be awesome. And that would be a great thing to put in an issue. Okay. Moving on to Fabrizio, you asked if we could talk about how to improve kubeadmin, kubeadm reference doc. What would you like to talk to us? What's going on?
Yes, thank you. So I'm Fabrizio Pandini. I work with SIG cluster lifecycle and in contributing for kubeadmin. And one of the objectives for 1.9 life cycle is to improve the documentation about the reference of kubeadmin. So far, we are maintaining these pages manually, and we want to improve, making something similar to what was already done for kubectl or kubefed, where part of the reference doc is generated from the Cobra command description and help. So we want to move from maintaining pages manually to generating part of the documentation automatically, and so we are guaranteed to keep the documentation in line with the code, and as well we want to maintain some extra doc to explain advanced installation topics which are already embedded in the documentation. So we discussed this a little bit inside our SIG. More or less the idea now is clear, and of course we are more than happy to follow the path is already there for kubeadmin, for instance. And yes, that's it. I raised the topic here because it's the right place, and it makes sense that we coordinate somehow in how to make this happen in reality. So I was reading your meeting notes, and I see that there are a document about the automatic generation of documents, which are usable. I have to get in to study it a little bit. So I think that there are some synergies that make sense to go on, and that's it. Open to see if this fit in your planning for this goal, and if there are someone that can support me in making this moving. That's it.
Thank you, Fabrizio. Joe, you've got your hand up.
Yeah, Fabrizio, since I'm the one who probably wrote a vast majority of that document you're now digging through, realize that it's a lot more archaeology than necessarily the way that you should do it. That's, it's not a bad thing. It's just, I think this section where we mix between hand-edited and generated documentation has grown fairly organically, and outside of the area that Phil Whitrock has really put in some yeoman's labor to manage, it's gotten a little convoluted and is not exactly clear. So I think it's going to be a little bit of working together to build it up to do what you want to do. I don't think there's any particular roadblocks to it, but I just want to give you a heads up that that's not necessarily a well-trod path at this point.
For a little bit more context, Fabrizio, the topic of automated docs is of great interest to us as well, mostly because we don't have a lot of control over our own processes. And that is a gap that we would very much like to fill. And a lot of the work that Joe is doing along with Steve Perry is digging into how automated docs are generated. Because right now, a lot of the updates that we have been making have been manual edits to generated material, and of course that's an unsustainable process. So we too are trying to figure out how to get to the root of our own automated doc processes. There has not been a lot of institutional knowledge preservation or transfer between when the automated processes were first set up and how they are maintained presently. So like Joe said, a lot of what he is doing is archaeology. He's digging through the layers of process and providing investigative findings rather than providing a sequential how-to document. That is our ultimate goal, but we are not there yet. So
I understand this. I did also a little bit of investigation in Kubernetes code base, and so I saw that I arrived to the right point to generate documents, but then I missed the last part, which is from the Kubernetes generated artifact to the website of the documentation. Okay, I think that it is acceptable to manage part of this process manually. It is important for me that we don't reinvent the wheel because it doesn't make sense. It creates problem to you and also to us. So I think that we are aligned on this.
Excellent. So, Joe, are you willing to take an action item for continuing that conversation?
Yes, absolutely. Sorry, I had to unmute. My connection got a bit unstable over on the side.
All good. Okay, awesome. Thank you.
Sorry, practically, how you contact me in Slack, or I have to create an issue? Is there any step that I have to do?
Generally, the best way to make, when it comes to actually updating the documentation, the best way is to open an issue or open a pull request against the documentation with the actual changes that you want to make. But in terms of coordinating which PRs to open against which material and what to change, maybe it's best if you start by like talking on Slack. Joe, will you reach out to Fabricio? He just joined the Sig Docs channel right before the meeting, so his Slack contact information is right there in the channel.
Already on it.
Perfect. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Certainly. Excellent. All right. Right. For our last item for today, we have Jessica Yao, who's going to give us a demo of a code sample CSS styling prototype. Jessica, take it away.
Unfortunately, the blender in this cafe just started, so let me know if you can hear me. All right, I'm going to share my screen. So
You're making me feel better, Jessica. I'm not the only one in the cafe.
The glories of working remote. Okay, that and like unstable Wi-Fi. How do I share my full screen?
There should be the share screen at the bottom.
Yeah, I'm seeing Windows, but I don't know if I'm able. Oh, desktop. There it is. Okay. So basically, I didn't want to muck around with Jekyll just yet. I just wanted to see what the HTML and CSS would look like. So this is like completely isolated. It's running in my own little directory. Or it's not running, it's like static, but whatever. And so the idea is that this is what it should look like. This is not, I'm going to go into the markdown part later, but essentially, I think the key item here is that it makes it easy to copy and paste code because you have this little icon thing. And then you can see the separation between like what user and host they are, and then also like the lines of code. And then Steve Perry mentioned that he wanted to be able to add commentary, and it's like super janky, but I was like, I'm just gonna stick a box over on the rain. And so like when you hover over it, like if there is like an attached comment, it will like change. So I don't know, we can talk more about the UI. I can show the clipboard actually. So if you copy the code to your clipboard and then go over here, I make it so that it only copies the lines that actually are code. So like these two lines, and it doesn't copy everything else. And so I guess like if you guys have feedback on the UI immediately, I don't know if we should talk about that first or if I can go into the second part, which is like the Jekyll integration. Do people have preferences?
Just to provide a little bit more context, I realize we kind of like plunged straight into this demo with the assumption that people knew what we were talking about. So the demo that Jessica's providing is for better code samples in our documentation. There was a discussion about a month ago about whether or not to include the command prompt when we give, or in code samples, whether or not to include the command prompt. And Jessica offered to provide a demo of kind of a best of both worlds solution where we can show the command line prompt in code samples, but but when you go to copy the code, the actual code sample, the command prompt doesn't copy. So that's what this demo is what that might actually look like in practice. Sorry, Jessica.
So I guess like maybe it will provide a bit more context about like what I've been working on and thinking about. So this is just like what it would render to, like the markdown would render to this. But the reason it's been taking me more time is that I want to keep it as similar to the old markdown syntax as possible, where you have like those backticks and then you specify the language, because that's what people are familiar with. Like hypothetically, it would be easier if I just made a new Jekyll tag, but I don't know if people would like know to use it. And so the question that I want to ask you guys is how the markdown should look to get this thing up. Like I can take care of actually like writing the parser and things, and that's what I've been working on. But I want to have a UI that's more friendly. So I had 3 options here, and obviously there might be other things I haven't even considered. So this is something that there's a existing sample online that looked similar, where it keeps like the little language thing here, but it also adds other options. So like user, root, host, localhost, output. I 0 indexed it because I think like a lot of programmers are used to that. But it's basically saying that lines 1 through 5 aren't going to have the little prefix thing. And then for Steve's like idea about comments, it's super hacky, but like I have it like this where you can treat this as like a separator between the two. Some things I've thought about that might not be desirable about this are that if you ever wanted to show like, I don't know, like root at like something on node 1 and then you immediately wanted to show something on node 2, this kind of assumes that the entire command block is all running with the same user and host. And I don't know if like we want to like optimize for all use cases just yet, but like that's a limitation with this kind of syntax. And so like another idea is having something that looks more like this, where you just indicate whether or not there's a prefix that we should be looking out for and whether or not there are comments. And if so, it's completely custom. So it doesn't just have to be root at localhost, it could be any other thing. And then like, if we passed it through like the parser, it would use these little things to separate out like the actual code from the other parts. And then finally, another thing that I was thinking about was that it might be kind of annoying to have like commentary like off to the side here that you can't really format. So like another possibility is that you have like a comment ID and then you have like other divs that are hidden that are like created before. And so like they're kind of linked with this. And so like I can write JavaScript code that will make sure to fill in that comment blurb, like this this gray box thing with whatever content is in here. But the thing about this is I just don't, like these two I think are definitely more readable than what's here, but that also means that they're kind of more annoying to write because then you have to like stick prefix separators everywhere. So like I don't even know if this is like something that, if it's user friendly enough that people would want to write this kind of stuff if it provided this sort of functionality. So if people have feedback on that, I think that's pretty important. So that's I'm open to like, people can just chip in now if they want.
So it seemed like your first case was kind of hitting the sweet spot of, with just a little bit of work, I get some really, really cool functionality. Mm-hmm. And then the other two were more customizable, but then if I got to write it and then I got to read it, they were like, it almost felt to me like the other two, yes, they're more customizable, but then it felt like I had to work really hard to get that cool feature. Whereas in the first one, I was like, boom, I got that cool feature pretty much right away. I mean, that's what popped in my head.
Okay, yeah. I mean, that's actually great to hear because the first one was the one I was working on. And like the other two were things that I was just thinking about like as I was doing it. Yeah. Any other thoughts?
Yeah, Jessica, this is Joe. For the comments, I don't know if there's an easy way to handle this, but in many of the larger code samples, you'll often want comments on their own line above or below. I think you could probably accommodate that reasonably well with just including in like your shell commands with just a comment prefix so that it would normally be hidden from a shell command if you copied and pasted it and got away with it. So that might be an alternative to putting the commentary on the side that sits off, and is basically constrained to be a little bit shorter.
Right, that makes sense. Yeah, I could do that. Like, I think I was just kind of lazy because it was easier to link the comment to the line when they're on the same line. There's a little bit more logic I have to add if it's like above or below, but I think that's fine. Yeah.
So when I think about like priorities in code sample maintenance, I think the first example is closer to what we want because it preserves the code sample more or less intact.
Right.
The second and third samples that you show require a lot of markdown injection into the prefix separators, and that makes a code sample less maintainable and less shareable overall. And like the ability for humans to parse it is important, but I'm also thinking about the future. Like if at some point for whatever reason we decide to separate code samples to extract them from the documentation or to import them by reference.
Yeah,
it's having a code sample that's maintained sort of on its own.
I see. Yeah, that
really
makes
valuable.
sense.
So I like the readability and I like the maintainability. of
Okay.
of the first sample. And I think to concur with Joe that placing commentary on its own line is going to be a better. I think that'll be a better strategy for maintaining it going forward.
Okay, yeah, that
I
makes
mean,
sense.
I really like this work. It's really cool.
Yeah, very cool.
Thank you. Yeah, I think I've been trying to balance this with like non-community work, so I think I'll be able to have something by next week where like it actually works with the markdown. Yeah.
Yeah, this is really excellent. Thank you for taking this on. I think the value to improving our code samples will be very high. So this looks really good, and I'm excited about where it's headed. And it sounds like other folks are too.
Yay, thank you.
All right. Anything more, Jessica?
That's it from me. Yeah.
Okay. Right, we have reached the end of our agenda. Last chance to add anything for discussion. Going once, going twice. All right, that is a Sig Docs meeting. Thanks, everybody. See you next week.
Thank you. Bye.
Ciao.
Thanks for joining us, Fabrizio.